Hi, this is Dr. Kimberly Leonard, author of Visualizing Happiness in Every Area of Your Life and host of this podcast, Incredible Life Creator. And today I have with me Jillian Haslam. Hey, Jillian.
Hi, Kimberly. Thank you so much for having me on your show. It's truly the greatest honor. Thank you.
I am so excited to share you and your story with people and also just to encourage people with your story. So I'm just going to read just a short bio and then we'll get started. Jillian Haslam's combination of compelling stories, humanitarian effort, and inspirational wisdom spellbind her audiences. She has spoken at countless prestigious organizations, including Cambridge University, King's College London, the Bank of England, PwC, Nova Nordisk, and more. She inspires her audiences to recognize and achieve their potential. As a survivor of poverty and oppression, Jillian Haslam brings a unique perspective from decades of proven resilience. She uses her own story to show others how to derive meaning from their hardships, find grace in adversity, and develop true purpose to achieve their destiny. Jillian honors the invaluable story within us all and shows us how to integrate our darkest moments to light the way to fulfillment. I love that. So happy to have you here, hear your story. So just tell us from the beginning.
Well, Kimberly, my parents were both British, and my father moved to India or was in India with the British Army, and his parents were both British. My parents were actually born in India to both uh, uh, British nationals. And my father was posted to Iraq, Iran, Egypt, all of those kind of countries, and served in the British Army. In 1947, India got her independence, and all of the British were asked to leave the country and come back to Britain. And hundreds of families decided to do that. And my dad's sister, for one, took all her children and brought them back here to Britain. But hundreds of families equally decided to stay in India, mainly I think because of the weather, but I also think because they had great lifestyles and they had become used to you know the kind of lifestyle they were leading there, and they grew up there, they were born there, and many of them loved it, and my father was one such person. So he made the decision to remain in India, and unfortunately, after 1947 and the 1 year that had lapsed, things took a turn for the worse. After 200 years, it's not surprising. So every day the papers were had headlines saying that India is for the Indians and so on and so forth, which means go back to your country. But it was too late then because the 1 year had lapsed, and we were basically all jobs went, and my father's decision actually led us. I wasn't born then, but with what I know happened is they were reduced to abject poverty. And he lost his job. He had one heart attack after the other after serving in the army for so long. There was all that trauma as well. But the sad thing is that once we came along, most of us were happened to be girls as well. And poverty actually took us to first, I can only, I mean, you're interviewing me, so I'll tell you about my life, but most of my siblings went through the same. We were reduced to living under a flight of stairs where about 2 or 3 feet from us, people pulled water from a tube well, they washed their clothes, they bathed their children, they went to the toilet, and it was very, very hard. So if you look up my first book called Indian English, you can see the picture of the stairs on the front of the book where we stayed. After that, we moved. My father got another heart attack. He was moved to the Salvation Army because the Salvation Army was a place where they took care of ex-British servicemen when they fell on hard times. Once my father was admitted there, we he got better, came and took us from under the stairs, and we went to live in a slum in a place called Kidapur, which is on the outskirts of Kolkata. where, to give you a very brief idea, we filled again water from a tube well. We lived in a room 8 by 10, the whole family, that 5 children, our parents, and of course my mother brought all the cats and dogs from the world too, because she had a heart of gold and wanted to help them all. But we shared, 3 toilets were shared with almost 3,000 people. And to even describe the poverty that we lived through is impossible for me. It was worse than poverty. It was very, very hard for us. We had hardly any electricity. We filled water from a tube well, as I mentioned, and we just basically survived from day to day. We lost 4 siblings to abject poverty and malnutrition. Actually, when I saw your name, my heart did skip a beat, because the twins we lost was a boy named Alan and a girl called Kimberly.
Mm.
And we also had 2 sisters who we lost, Carol and Minnie, and we lost all of them before the ages of 6 months to malnutrition and poverty. My father put us to boarding school because the area was just teeming with men, and it wasn't a safe place for us to stay. So he put us all to boarding school. One at a time, we all went into the same school. And the principal over there at the time was a person called Mr. David Cameron. He was a very, very lovely person. He took us all in without asking for any fees at all. Because my mother had gone from school to school, but no school would accept us with any money, without any fees. And sadly, we were put to the same school, we got an education, but sadly, we were left in school for most of our holidays. When we did go home, there was only poverty, there was no food, there was no happiness, there was no toys, there were no holidays, there were no smiles. But we actually grew up in that one room where we learned our greatest lessons. The poorest of the poor helped to save our lives. There was a woman who used to sell bad potatoes and tomatoes. She used to give it all to us. And we used to come home, cut it, and make our food out of it. There was a meat man who used to sell meat, and he used to keep all the bones for us. We used to go in the evening and collect all the bones and make soup. I could tell you so many stories of the people who were the poorest of the poor who helped to save our lives. There was Mother Teresa, who used to come on her rounds. That's the very first time I met her, where all her sisters of charity used to give us one bag of powdered milk and one packet of biscuits, and sometimes, if you were lucky, a bag of clothes, which all people from abroad had sent to India, for the poor. And sometimes we used to collect these granny knickers that used to start. We were only girls of 6 and 7 and 8 years old, and it used to start on our hip and end at our ankles. But we didn't have knickers, so we used to wear those knickers and walk around the whole area, because we were very proud that we had knickers. So that's how I grew up.
Wow, that is, so many people cannot even relate to that because they
Yeah.
grew up and they had a warm house to live in.
Yeah.
And they had food. They never, thought, what am I going to eat next?
Yeah.
So it's just even hard to imagine, I think, for a lot of people. And so the question is, how did you get from school and poverty to doing what you're doing now? What was your big
Kimberly,
break? How did you leave that place? There's other, you know, there are other people who are in poverty, who are, for some reason, have disadvantages. They're in abusive places, and they're wanting to know, how do you get out of something like that?
I think I've got to attribute everything, or my success, to my parents, because my mother she had a heart bigger than herself. She used to bring every single person off the road into our little room. We used to all sleep in a row on the floor, one sister and one brother after the other. My parents used to sleep on this single bed. But she would see a poor person on the road, and she would just bring him into the house, and we would say, "Mummy, this is a strange man. We've never known him. You can't just bring him in. Most of us are girls. We have only one little brother. What are you doing?" And she used to say, "What three can eat, four can eat. So we are going to share with him, and he's going to stay with us. He doesn't have a home." And he was obviously filthy and very run down and, almost a beg. And she used to say, when your father comes home, we'll ask his advice. And if he asks me to ask the man to leave, he'll leave. So we used to run down the lane and say to my father, you know what, mommy's brought another man to stay with us. And what are you going to do about it? And he used to walk very calmly and come home. And then when he used to sit down, he used to say, well, your mother's word is final. Children should be seen and not heard. So the man stays. And that was my mother, highly charitable. And my father was a person of stories and quotes and inspiration. And he never ever explained anything to us without a story or a line of inspiration. And I think I got a little bit by both of them. So today I have 6 charities and I attribute that to my mom. And today I'm a motivational speaker and I do what I do, changing lives, but I can attribute that to my dad. So I think that's really where I got it from. But when I left school, my elder sister was already moved to New Delhi, where she was struggling and finding a job. And when I was 17, my father said, you can't stay here because the area was just teeming with men. So he took me to Delhi and I started working there in a very, very tiny company. And then suddenly I saw this ad in the newspaper for an executive secretary to the CEO of Bank of America. And in my head, I was so excited. I was already starting to buy my house and my car and look after my little siblings and everything, but I hadn't even got the job. And then I went for the interview, and 6 months of rigorous meetings, trainings, examinations. It was like being interviewed to work for the Queen of England, believe you me. Mm-hmm. But I went through those interviews. We started with 250 girls. I remember going for the first meeting, and there was this hall of girls with 250 desks. And the lady said to me, here's your paper, here's your pen, take a seat. And I looked in the hall and said, are you sure I'm in the right place? She said, you are, take a seat. And I took a seat. And from then on, I started going through, the process. And finally, we came down to 3 girls, and then we came down to 1. And then I was put in front of the CEO for the final interview. I just told him my story from my heart. And he just looked me straight in the eye and said, we'll let you know. And I thought I had lost it. But then a week or 2 later, I had the appointment letter in the post, and that man changed my life. He did everything for me and also got me my British ancestry papers because I had told him about my parents and what had happened. And he flew me to England, got me the ancestral documents. And so here I am today.
Beautiful. So you were working in India then for the Bank of America.
Yes, I was working in India for Bank of America. The hours were very long. He was featured as the most frequent traveler in the country. I actually had my own secretary. That's how busy we were. And it was just hours from 7 a.m. to 11 p.m. And it was just non-stop work. But I had promised him that I would do what it took to learn from people like him. And I would do any amount of hard work to make it in life. And I think he saw that.
That is awesome. That is awesome. But still, 250 down to 1. I mean,
Yes. I think it all boils down to how badly do you want something? If you want it bad enough, you will fight for it. And I wanted it bad enough because my mom had cancer and I had 2 little siblings, Susan and Neil, to look after. They were very tiny. My dad was already ailing at the time and was very, very ill. And I needed that job and I needed to look after them and I needed to help my mom through her cancer. And it was only that was driving me to get that job. And I think that's what helped. Your mindset.
Yes, for sure. So let's talk about that mindset because there are people and situations now, and it can be all various situations but the people know who we're talking to right now. If you're listening and we're talking to you, this is where you pay attention. So if you're in a situation that you absolutely have to get out of, what would be the first step, the first thing? How do we change our minds to go from the mindset that created the situation we're in And sometimes we created it, sometimes we're just put into it, but somehow there's a different mindset that keeps us in one place. And there's a different mindset that allows us to go to the next place.
Yes, Kimberly, I think I'm going to answer your question with saying to you that we have to remember, and this is what I've learned, is that your mind is your greatest asset, and we need to train it relentlessly. We've got to understand that no matter the circumstances or the human pain or difficulties that we go through, we've got to understand that our mind, we do have the power to overcome adversity. We do have the power to thrive, but our minds are our greatest assets. And sometimes we can lose touch with that. We really go superficially with what people are doing. So we want to be like them. We want to, but actually we have the greatest asset within us. We just need to reframe adversity or difficulty, as some people would call it. We need to reframe that as a feature. And so, to give you an example, if you look at Oprah Winfrey, she's been through childhood trauma, unimaginable childhood trauma and poverty. But she's now a media mogul. Look at her. But that's because she's reframed adversity as a teacher and not as um, something to put you down all the time, something that you can look at and say, I am poor and I will always be poor and I never had this, I never had that, I never had an upbringing, I never had an education. You have to stop the blame game and you have to understand cause and effect. If you always feel affected, you can never feel, you know, the cause of what. This is the most important thing. And I also think that instead of asking why me all the time, why me? Why has God done this to me? Why is it always me? Why am I always suffering? Ask, what can I learn from this? What can I take away and turn it into gold? There's a great quote that my dad used to use. I think it was by William Barclay. I think so. But he used to say, endurance is not just a hard thing, but it's the ability to turn it into glory. It's only when you can take endurance and turn it into glory that the world suddenly wants to know you. If you can't take your pain and endurance, the world couldn't care. So I think develop mental toughness. That's the most important thing. And if you think of Elon Musk, look at him. He's been through so many failures, but just look at him. He's the richest man in the world today. So I think we need to practice also delayed gratification. And by that, I mean, try to think of your past as something to learn from, not something that has made you who you are today. Like, I blame my past because this happened to me, because I never got an education. I had bad parents. I had a difficult life. Um, try to use it as delayed gratification, as this is something that can teach me to be who I can be. This is something I can learn from. It's all about a shift in mindset. That's what I think, Kimberly. That's what I think.
Mm-hmm. And as people are working through that, sometimes we have tools we can use. So, for example, sometimes people have coaches or people who do some type of trauma clearing, or people do journaling or meditating or different things. So, if some and they do that because sometimes they're so stuck in their thinking that, like you said, the why me, or they're so stuck in their thinking that they need some help in some way to actually turn that around. Is there anything that you've done that helps with that? Or was it just like, just get up in the morning and do what you're supposed to do?
No, I think everybody needs a bit of help. And like I said, I think words matter. And sometimes if you do feel stuck and you do feel hard, and definitely your mind is a muscle. And if you can understand this, that you can train your mind. Resilience is not something you're born with. Resilience is like a skill. It's what is resilience? Resilience is the ability to keep getting up time and time again, every time you fall down, really, in a nutshell. But if you can look at resilience, many people just think, oh, it's resilience. No. If you can look at resilience as a muscle, like when you go for a soft skill training, I want to become better at swimming. I want to become better at cooking. I want to become better at training. I want to become better at something. If you can look at resilience like that, you will understand how important it is. And resilience helps your mental mindset. I always believe, Kimberly, in the quote that you can't pour from an empty cup. You have to be full yourself. You have to be complete and whole yourself to be able to deliver to yourself. That's what I think. But in terms of your question, I would say my tips would be develop mental endurance and keep moving. Because if you can understand resilience and how you can fight and build this muscle neurologically, and if you can use that, then that will strengthen your mind. And then you have to just keep moving every time you have this setback. Just force yourself to keep moving. This builds and develops mental endurance. Second tip I would give you is to practice failure stacking. What does that mean? That means that every time you fail, just use it as a stepping stone to get to go up further and further and further. This is what I mean. Just keep stacking it all the time instead of seeing it as a setback. And the third tip I would give you is take responsibility, because no one is out there who's going to come to you and save you. You've got to save yourself. It's a DIY world. Do it yourself. You've got to get up and you've got to say, my siblings are busy, my parents are busy, my friends are busy, they all have their own lives. It's me, Maya, and myself. I have got to save myself. I have one life, one chance, and I've got to make it. That's what I think.
I love that. I love that. And I love your failure stacking. Because so many times we look at failure and we're like, oh, and we do stack the failure, but we're stacking it with a, it's like evidence that, oh, you're no good. You can't do this because we've said we have all these failures. But what you're saying is instead of stacking them in one pile, stack them here, step up on top of it, say, okay, that's all right. And if you get the next failure, instead of falling back, you're like, oh no, I'm just going to step up again. I love that
Yeah,
analogy.
it's like that little folk tale, where the crow wanted to get water out of a jar and he just kept dropping pebbles in the jar until the water rose. He had his drink of water.
Hmm.
That's what we have to think of. And that's what we have to believe, because it is the truth, Kimberly. It is the truth. We can't pour from an empty cup. And until and unless we are strong ourselves and we build this resilience, nothing else will be possible.
Hmm.
And if you really look at history, most people who have been successful have failed more than others, struggled more than others, but they have also risen faster than others. And they see setbacks as setups.
Hmm. I love
If you
that.
really look at their
Setbacks and
stories,
setups.
yeah, they look at setbacks as setups. Like Edison, he failed
Hmm.
with the light bulb 10,000 times, but he looked at it as, no, these are 10,000 times that I did it wrong. That's how I look at it. But I will go down in history that I invented this night bulb, and I want to go down in history. So it's a question is, what legacy do you want to leave behind? How successful do you want to be? That's the mindset I try to get people to reframe and to shift to.
It's beautiful. I love that.
Thank you.
So I have to ask, I know you were a child, but you did meet Mother Teresa.
Yes, Kimberly, I did. And I was a little girl, as I just briefly mentioned, when we were living in this place in Kidapur. And all the Sisters of Charity used to give us, the bag of food or the biscuits or the clothes. And once in a way, she used to come to all her centers and she used to see that the nuns are carrying out, the job well. And it used to be a Friday and we used to queue up for hours on end, sometimes for 6 hours at a time, just to get what we could. And there used to be 5, 6, 700 people in the line, in the queue. And one day I was in that queue with my little sister, and I went forward, and she gave me a bag of powdered milk and a packet of biscuits, and she just pat me on the cheek like that and said, "Okay, next." That's it. And I moved. And I didn't know that so many years later I would be presented with the Mother Teresa Memorial International Award in 2017. And when I won the award, I got the award at St. Teresa's Church, and the city was lined with police all through. And I walked with the awards with a procession of people from St. Teresa's Church to Mother House, where she is buried today, which is her memorial tomb. And they gave me the greatest honor of my life to put the wreath on her tomb with the Indian flag. And the sister who was in charge actually took me to her little room. It's very tiny. It must be about 6 by 4 feet or something. And it's locked with a great big iron gate with a padlock. But they let me into that room for 5 minutes. They opened the door and they let me in. And it was the greatest moment of my life. And she moved away and she allowed me to stand there. I stood there and I only found one sari, a single bed and a mattress, one plate, one pair of slippers. And that's all I found. And I stood there. And when I came out, I said to the sister in charge, "I don't know how all this is happening to me. I worked in banking. I never ever wanted to be an author or an engineer or a doctor or a teacher. I only had this one passion to want to help hundreds of people. But how I've got this award and how I've achieved all this." And she caught my hand and she said, "I can explain a lot to you, but Mother Teresa said it best, that sometimes you become a pencil in the hands of God. And I want you to see that." And that was the greatest moment of my life.
Oh, wonderful. So beautiful.
Thank you. Yeah.
Wow. And don't we all want to be that? Don't we all
Correct.
want to be the pencil in the hand of God?
Correct. Yes, we do. And I thought that was a very, and her, her words resonated with me because I was in RBS for 13 and a half years. I was in Bank of America for 5 years. And I could have stayed there till I was an old lady and people loved me and I could have just worked out my career. But there was this calling, there was this push, there was this need, there was this, I couldn't go there anymore. And it was like power was pulling me out of there and saying, "This is not for you. You need to go in another direction." And because of financial reasons, because of, the lives we are in, because of what we believe and, our circles, I stuck to my job. But there came a time, Kimberly, when nothing I did mattered. What mattered was me being with the people who needed me the most, and the 6 charities and the work that I do now. And now I feel like completely whole. I just get out of bed every morning so happy because it's where I know I belong.
No.
Because I speak on one end to corporates and all of these women's organizations, and I do all this public speaking, but then I take those proceeds and give it to the people who need it.
Yes. So, what was the first charity that you started, and how did you start? Because there's a lot of people who would like to start a nonprofit and they want to help in some way, but they don't even know what's the first step.
So where I started, Kimberly, was I just went to the city and put out on social media that, all of you boys and girls who are interested in really and genuinely helping people, please meet me at this place. And you will not believe the turnout was enormous. It was great. And some people said, "I love working with children." Some people said the disabled. Some people said the aged. Some people said women. And that's how I started all these groups of sending people out to different places. And today we work with little ones who, providing them an education. I have beautician schools for girls, computer schools for girls, English language school for girls, secretarial schools for girls. We help the disabled, and mainly women. We help the aged. There are so many people who are just bent in two with no hope at all. And I have all these 6 charities and I have all these people helping me. And I think I couldn't be in a better place. And I do that every day. Apart from working nonstop and, doing all my speaking and trainings and stuff, but I spend a lot of my time just giving back and making sure that I can bring hope to other people. That's what I love to do. That's where my heart lies.
Is amazing. And thank you so much for what you're doing.
Oh, thank you. It's okay.
Yes.
I love what I do.
Yes. So if people wanted to connect with you and be a part of it or have you come and speak, how do they get a hold of you?
Kimberly, I have a website which is www.jillianhaslam, just by my name, .com. Or I am all over social media. I'm on Instagram and Facebook, YouTube, the normal channels. And I would be delighted to help people. I've spoken at the most number of schools in the country, and I've spoken to women's organizations, of course, many corporates because I have a banking background, and I've spoken at Cambridge and all of the big universities too. So I'm happy to help wherever possible.
Wonderful. And we haven't talked about your book yet. Would you like to talk about that?
Yes, of course. I'll show you a picture of my book. That's the book, A Voice Out of Poverty, that I wrote. And actually, I've been very fortunate, Kimberly. It's received endorsements from Vikas Swaroop, who is the author of the movie Slumdog Millionaire, because I actually made the cover of the Telegraph as the real Slumdog Millionaire. And so he wrote to me, and I've also received endorsements from Sarah, Duchess of York, from the royal family, and also from Dame Joanna Lumley here, who has my background, but who never grew up in so much poverty. But I think the main messages of my book to people, even though I've told the whole story in all its gory details, and it's now currently with 2 or 3 producers to be turned into a full-length feature film. I think to me, the most important thing is the messages that go out to people. That's the most important thing that people need to take away and understand that their minds are their greatest assets and they should train their minds relentlessly. That's the message I'd like to leave with people. And of course, from a charity perspective, service is the greatest form of success. At least that's how I see it. And I believe that true success is not about you making it through on your own, but remembering to take others with you. That's what brings you even more success. That's what I've learned in life.
Thank you. So now I have a personal question.
Yes, of course.
What gives you the most happiness and fulfillment in your life at this point?
Wiping the tears of others, giving others hope, and especially when people have no hope at all and they can't buy their medicines or they can't have a meal a day, or a girl or a woman has 2 and 3 children and she doesn't even know how to feed them. Her husband is a rickshaw man or an auto man and they earn very, very little. And when I train her and give her her first beauty kit or her secretarial certificate, and I put her out to work and she starts earning money, the smiles are unimaginable. That's what I look for. That's what gives me the greatest joy.
Thank you. Well, thank you so much for being on the podcast today,
It's a pleasure.
sharing your story, your wisdom. So,
It's my pleasure. Thank you for inviting me, Kim.
yes. So I have one last question before we finish.
Of course.
What is your best advice on living an incredible, amazing life?
Best advice. Again, I have to say, your mindset is your greatest asset. Train it relentlessly and you will succeed. Resilience is a skill, not a trait. You are not born with it, you can build it. Please believe that. 3. Service is the greatest form of success. It brings fortune of a very different kind. And find a purpose in your pain, use it to guide you. And the best leaders are the ones who help people, who help others. That's what I believe. The best leaders in the world, if you really look around you, they are the people who help people first, put people first. They are the leaders, like Gandhi, Mother Teresa. All of them will go down in history, time indefinite. But that's because they put people first. Martin Luther King, all of them. Yeah. So we need to remember that, to always put people first.
Thank you so much, Jillian.
Pleasure.
We'll talk to you again soon.
Thank you.